John, I have a note for us from me, which is that we don't make enough eye contact with that camera anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
You've always been good about it. I've never been good about it. So my endeavor...
I'm so into the
I know,
footage.
The screen...
Okay, I'm making eye contact with the camera as I remind you that this is Polite Fight. I'm John Teti, your editor-in-chief, joined as always by video producer extraordinaire Gus Spellman, and we are here to talk about Season 6, Episode 3 of Game of Thrones, Oathbreaker. We're gonna talk about eye contact today as it happens. So let's, this is all you. You notice Jon Snow eye contact I have in my notes.
This post-revival segment with John that opens the episode, for me, there were things about it that worked, things that didn't. But after I finished the episode, I was thinking, ultimately it did work for me, so I went back to watch the scene again to see what about it made it work for me. And I found something that I didn't really expect, which is this pattern they set up with the character's eye contact. As he wakes up, every single character who sees him, from Davos to even Ghost to Melisandre.
That's pretty intense, the Melisandre look there.
And so is Davos's. I mean, that's what we open the episode on. And so they're all like focused on him so intensely. Whereas John is having a little more trouble with that. He's sort of like looking off screen in his own world. And it's only very slowly that he ends up coming back to them. And then it continues out here with all these guys looking at him and sort of culminates with a shot of Tormund looking like right at him. And this is where I think you can see John really start to revive. But I just thought this was a really effective way to isolate John from the world that he's come back to for a second and make it like a gradual transition, and to communicate how insane this is for all the other characters, you know?
Yeah, so that doesn't feel communicated that this guy came back from the dead.
I think it does. It's a fantasy show, so I think they want to make sure the impact is like, oh, everybody thinks this is nuts.
Not something that happens every day.
Right.
Yeah. Well, as long as we're talking about staging and character interactions, I want to talk about two sort of debate scenes where one character is trying to manipulate the other. It's the Varys scene and the High Sparrow scene. And I'm gonna start with the High Sparrow scene, even though I believe it's later in the episode. I was just struck by this one seemingly throwaway moment when the High Sparrow asks if he can sit down.
Your Grace, may I do mine? It's my knees.
Now, whenever somebody asks if they can sit down, take notice when you're watching a movie or a TV show, because that's a justification of a change in staging, okay? And that's a signal to you to look for that character to pivot their tactics. I had a professor when I was in college who talked about an emotional quiver. I don't know if this is a general term or if this is just something that he used to say, but he would talk about how in a good scene, characters who are trying to convince each other will use a number of arrows in their emotional quiver. They'll pull them out. Maybe they'll be angry or threatening, or maybe they'll, hang back and try to draw the other people in. But you want a character to shift and use multiple arrows in a scene to make it interesting. So the High Sparrow has a very potent quiver. When we start out this scene, we have this confrontational energy. It couldn't be more clearly confrontational, right? Then they have the guards hang back, and the High Sparrow asks to sit down. And that's when he shifts from this sort of authoritative, this is the way it's going to be tone, to more of an advisory tone, and you can see Tommen is a little thrown by this. But we come from that confrontational, like lines drawn to this half-circle shape that they're united under. I mean, they look like best buddies here, don't they? And to me, again, the pivot moment is, can I sit down? Always take note when there's something like that.
So let me ask you, I mean, to me, them giving him that line of dialogue, to me, that is a little bit taking what could have been subtext and making it text. You could have gotten what you're talking about with these two shots, and he's still using his emotional quiver. But here, it's almost like he has an aside to the audience, basically, and says, hey guys, I've got a new arrow I'm pulling out. Everybody take note, take note, take note. And to me, that's something that I don't like to see, or it bugs me because I feel like I'm being pandered to. And I feel like I can follow those shifts without having a character literally say, hey, I'm shifting position here.
I think in a lot of situations I would agree with you, but here, you know, the High Sparrow is such a condescending character. No matter what quiver he's using, there is this element of smugness to it and condescension to it, right? So I think that he says it out loud.
Tommen is so dull that he might miss it.
Exactly.
And he even
wants
has
to make
to
sure.
invite Tommen to sit down again.
Right. He wants to make sure Tommen gets the message, I think is why that's done there.
I guess that's okay.
But you're right,
still...
it's gilding the lily a little bit. So I want to compare that scene to this scene with Varys and Vala, which I love the staging of this scene. It takes place in the empty throne room, and the staging of it captures Varys' subtle tactics so well. The High Sparrow, not that subtle, I think, as we just talked about. But Varys is subtle. There's a complexity in this space here because it's a throne room, yes, but it's an empty throne room. And Varys stays at the bottom. He doesn't arrogate himself to a higher position. He doesn't go up on the stairs. He speaks to Vala on the ground. There's this implication of power, but he says, oh, no, I'm not applying that myself. I'm trying to help you. And he also says, see it from my perspective. He talks to her as if she's an equal, even though she's not. And every once in a while, he just sprinkles in a little, actually, I'm the one who holds all the cards here, right? So it's a very different form of manipulation than the High Sparrow, and I like how the staging is set up to match that, to echo the tactics of the cajolers in these scenes.
Okay, what's a good segue?
This Arya scene is a tour de force of editing.
For me, what was really impressive about this is that it doesn't just sort of elide time and is really good at progressing us through this storyline that I think everybody's been sort of like, God, are we gonna have to watch her do this whole training scene? Can't we just do like a Keanu Reeves, I know Kung Fu? Right. And this does it like this basically gets us there pretty well. But it also gives us all this exposition about Arya. It tells us everything about her past, reminds us about everything basically that's important with her story, even in like very small details, and it doesn't feel like it at all. They find a way to like make it emotionally resonant and
well,
cover
it's
all
not
this
just
time.
that. They give it a new emotional resonance as she's taking this big step in her journey, right? One of the key editing choices here for me is that Arya recites her list to the waif on the cusp of this moment where she gets up and resumes the fight with a new resolve.
Cersei Lannister, Gregor Clegane, Walder Frey.
Right, so the list, which has so long served as a representation of her deep bitterness and her need for revenge, now becomes a catharsis. She rises up from the ground and takes on the fight anew with a new clarity. Now she can predict the waif's moves. Now she can actually hold her own.
Yeah, that's great to note that as like this sort of turning point in this whole sequence.
There's also some purely visual choices that work very well too. At first, it is very dark. All we have lit are these strange buckets, or I don't know what those are at the top, right? And then as the montage progresses, it becomes lighter and lighter until the point where when Arya is about to get up, she's cast in what is a pretty sharp light from above, right? Look how different that lighting is from the beginning of the fight, right?
Great.
It gives you a sense of the dawning of a new Arya in the way that they subtly ramp up the light in this fight scene over the course of the montage.
Yeah, does it continue? No, and then it...
No. In fact, the whole tenor of the light changes.
But there is definitely like a progression. It starts with cool light, then bright, harsh, sort of white light, and then much warmer tones for her victory.
I mean, for me, the dark fight is, she's blind, she's in the darkness, and then the climax moment is brightly lit, and she, sort of becomes the new Arya at that point, I think, by getting up.
Maybe the light is harsh because she's seeing things in a new way.
Well,
maybe the eyes are opening. I think there's a lot of different things you can read into it, regardless of what you read into it. The progression works emotionally, subtly.
Right. All right, now for the comments this week, we've got something a little different. We've got follow-up comments from last week, right?
The first was from Bubbles Rap, who said, a Reddit genius pointed out that Cersei wore the same dress to Joffrey's funeral and now to Myrcella's funeral. And he says, like, her family is getting killed so much that her funeral attire is literally worn out.
Getting a little ratty.
Yeah, and
Great spot.
Yeah, I don't really think usually of Game of Thrones going this far and playing the long game like that. And I was really, impressed to see that they had that level of detail.
I think this show does it maybe more than we realize, because this week when Tommen visits with the High Sparrow, he says, "I am the king." And that sounded familiar to me, and I just searched for "I am the king" on the web, and again, another Reddit genius noticed that Tywin Lannister said a couple seasons ago, anyone who has to say "I am the king" is not really the king. So Game of Thrones does play these subtle long games.
I wonder if it's the same Reddit genius. You guys should just be reading
There's
Reddit.
just one.
And don't watch the show, just go read Reddit. And then
Emimi, okay.
Said the cartoon violence with the giant and zombie mountain, remember we talked about their smashings of men as sort of Looney Tunes style as opposed to Ramsay's stabbing as sort of more human and psychological.
Right.
Emimi says, I think the cartoon violence with the giant and the zombie mountain also serve to put these characters in a different category. They are sort of non-human / mystical. And I thought that was really interesting that the show is drawing a line between magical violence as a little more cartoony and human violence as a little more
real and impactful. Yeah. That's a great call. I did not think about that at all. But yeah,
it's kind of obvious too. It's
it is now.
Yeah.
Now that Emimi pointed it out, it is. But yeah, you have these otherworldly characters with this wacky, outsized violence that doesn't really. I mean, I don't think we can really conceive of it exactly, so it doesn't hit as hard as Ramsay jabbing a knife in his father's gut.
Yeah. I'm curious to track that through this season
Me too.
See if that's just a distinction from that one episode or if we're going to see more of that.
Hey, we love it when you point out these longer threads and connections in the Polite Fight comments, and of course we read the TV Club review comments too, but keep it coming because we can't notice everything, obviously. We miss a lot of stuff, and you guys are really good at spotting that. So thanks for your contributions to the discussion. I'm John Teti for Gus Spellman. Thanks for watching Polite Fight too. We'll see you next week. So long for now.
Bye, guys.